Hello, my friend. I hope that this day is sunshiny and awesome, and this is going to be a good segue. I hope you're having a joy-filled day. So, this is another episode of the Back to Me podcast, and today we are talking joy, 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 joy. And I'm talking with Lisa McCourt, and you are the founder of the Joy School, which I love. And you've written more than one book, haven't you? This one is
Yes.
called, the one I see on the screen is Free Your Joy. I'm reminded of, do you remember that song in like the 80s, Free Your Mind? I can't,
Yeah.
yeah, right? Free your joy and the rest will follow. Welcome, Lisa. It's so nice to have you. Oh my
Thank
gosh.
you. Thank
Right?
you, Heather. I'm happy to be here with you.
Yeah. Of course, people know that I'm always looking for ways to help people live happier and more joy-filled lives. So this is perfect. I feel like you're the perfect person to come and have a conversation. But here's the interest, and I know I asked you this when we had our chat, I think it was, last week or something, but how did you come to be the founder of the Joy School? Like a little bit of how you got here, and that'll lead us into where you are.
Right. Like, what ever give you the idea that this is a real job that you could have?
Right?
Circus
Who
people.
invented, who said that you could, who said that you could make a school based on joy? What the heck?
Yes. Joy School is a school of spiritual principles. And I've always used the word joy. My joy trainings have gone back like 20 years now. And I think it's because it was such a huge part of my journey to realize that through application of some really time-tested ancient principles that are now backed by modern science and they're in positive psychology, but these principles really can create a day-to-day baseline of joy. And I think that most people do not really think that that's possible. If you ask anybody, would you like more happiness in your life? No matter where they fall on happiness, most people would say, yeah, I definitely want more happiness, sure. But they don't believe that it's possible to just create that as a consistent state of being. And that was my biggest discovery. So I've just called everything joy. Joy has just been the word that I've branded for many years now.
But it's perfect because it just, people understand immediately, right? It's like joy. Yeah, I get it. And it is interesting that we have a tendency not to believe that it's a thing that we can have. And do you find that it's people don't think they deserve it, or they don't think it's real, or they like, where do you think find people fall for the most part?
Oh, that's a great question. I think deep down at potentially a subconscious level, people don't think that they deserve it. I think that we're programmed at this time in humanity and our cultures that we all grew up in, we're programmed to look outside ourselves for our joy. When I get that in place and that relationship and that amount of money and that home or that degree or that prestige, then I get to have joy inside. That's a completely backward equation. We have to learn the skill of joy. We have to be joyful and peaceful in our inner landscape, we call it in Joy School, before we can send out the proper energy to create all those things that we think we want out there. And when we have that thinking that, all these things have to be in place before I can have joy, those things feel out of our control. So joy feels out of our control. And it's really
Well,
not.
and I've like, you can see people who have put all those things in place, and then they get there and they think, why aren't I happy? Or where is this magical thing? I still feel like I'm the same. And I think they become quite despondent, you know, and then they're lost, which is
For
so
sure.
sad,
But
right?
but but sometimes that's the exact sort of bottoming out, or that's the exact shift in perspective that allows you to see the bigger picture and realize that all these things that we're always wanting and chasing, and they're always just dangling carrots at the end of the stick that we're chasing, and they're always changing. And it's nothing wrong with having desires. That's like part of the human experience. People always come into joy school like, well, it's just about manifestation. Or you can help me manifest this guy because I really want to get that guy. Or you can help me manifest that job. And it's like, yeah, it is basically, because when we get everything else in here right, manifestation just sort of happens naturally, but you're not going to care so much because
Right.
the
It's
only
like
reason you
it's
want that is
a, it's an indirect, effect of it. It's just, well, you will get it, but that's not what's going to make you happy, right? You're going to
not.
be happy, and then you'll get it.
Nothing wrong with chasing things out there, having desires, making them happen. It's just we have to be so much more light about it than we are. We just have to like care a lot less,
Right.
pull in the investment a lot less of what we believe that these things are going to bring us, because they don't ever.
Right. And I think that um, a lot more people, maybe I have found this, a lot more people are looking for that right now, maybe than they have in the past, because it's almost like this sudden realization that, wait a minute, I'm not happy. And a lot of people are getting those things that they think they want and they're not happy. But I don't find there's been a lot in the world to help people understand what it is. So it's so interesting that you've got a whole, whole school to teach them what joy is. And you made a reference to like ancient practices and scientific research. And maybe you can speak a little bit about what that is, because I think probably most people don't know that this is a thing, right?
Right. Well, scientifically, I'm speaking of, energy, the way that we all know that what we expect is what we're going to create. We know that on some level, right? Psychologists call it self-fulfilling prophecy. Whatever we
Yeah.
deep down believe we deserve, that's all we're going to be able to create, because we create from our beliefs and from energy. So that's what I mean by the science part. But in terms of, ancient spiritual principles, this stuff goes back to the basic tenets of Buddhism. The Buddha said, like, life is suffering, not because he was a pessimistic downer guy. It was an observation, right? He's just saying everybody's like kind of suffering, and that's because we attach to outcomes. We attach to, I want it to be like this, but it's like that, so I'm going to suffer. When we can release our attachments, we enter a different space of creation where it's not that hard to get it all the way we want it out there. It's the lack of attachment to our desires creates such a more effective path toward having our desires.
But
And
it's interesting that because I have found sometimes in people who are looking at Buddhism, they've taken that life is suffering as a prescription
oh
instead,
no,
instead of no, he wasn't telling you that you had to suffer. You know what I mean? That's not what
no,
he meant. That's not what he meant.
none at all. He was creating a path to enlightenment, which is the end of suffering, which is really basically being okay with what's happening in the present moment, staying in the
Right.
present moment, not being out there in our future projections of anxiety and fear and worry, and not being in our past, keeping alive our regrets and resentments and all of that, but being here in the present moment. Huge thing in Buddhism, so that we can release all those attachments, and that's how we release suffering.
And like we, I have found that a lot of people, like the past is they use it as a, well, if that happened, then it's going to happen again, instead of I mean, it's not ignoring the past, it's an education. I was having this contemplation actually just earlier today when I was meditating, that we're here in earth school, so it's all lessons, so we can't do things wrong. It's just lessons, we're just learning. But because this lesson was this, doesn't mean that you have to do that lesson again. Unless you didn't learn it, right?
Right.
So I was speaking with someone who'd had um, several things happen in her life. They were pretty major. When she was telling them to me, I thought, oh my goodness. But so those are informing her future actions, because she has a fear that if I do something, these things happened and they'll happen again. instead of release. It's like you say, this is now, that was then. This now informs my awareness of potentialities, but I can choose something different, right? And I think choice is such a big part of, and this is probably true of your Joy School, choice is such a big part, and we haven't been taught that we have the power to choose.
Right. It's what you were just describing is what we call in Joy School becoming the observer, not being so attached to our thoughts, that ticker tape that never stops going past our mind. We're always like listening to, subscribing to these thoughts that are going by. And the human condition today is that we're pretty much living more in the abstract world of our thoughts than we are in the real world of consciousness, of the energy that we are in this moment. So when you're completely invested in that abstract world, you identify with your thoughts, you think they're who you are, and that does not lead to joy for most of us. So yeah, becoming that observer of the tendency allows us to see, okay, it makes sense that I'm expecting XYZ thing based on this thing that happened in the past. And usually whatever that horrible thing is that happened in the past, you can look back and find the same flavor of thing happening prior to that and prior to that and prior to that. Because when we're very young, creating our beliefs about how it is here in this wacky world we've landed in, what is true about love, power, money, men, women, what is my place in it all? We create those beliefs when we're so young and impressionable and immature and don't really have a lot of logic, and we think everything's about us. So we form this filter of beliefs that we go on to create our whole lives through. So it's a breaking away from that filter, getting to see the filter and what it's doing from the observer perspective is what drains it of its energy to keep us in that cycle, that repetitive cycle of creation.
Right. And it is true. Like, I know sometimes you don't even know that the patterns of behavior you have are, I mean, sometimes you can't remember the event that formed it, right? Because you're so little and you don't have any way to discern. So we all come out with something, some weird things, some weird entrenched coding in our system. I heard somebody calling it, your operating system.
Mm-hmm.
But operating systems can be updated. I mean, just ask your Mac computer because mine is constantly asking me if it can update. I'm like, yeah, sure, go ahead.
For sure.
But do we let ourselves do it? No, I need to hold this old operating system, even though the new apps aren't running on it.
Right. Familiarity feels safe.
So from talking, it sounds like a lot of the tenets of Joy School are almost wrapped up in the tenets of Buddhism.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
The Vedic teachings, a lot of ancient spiritual wisdom shows up in Buddhism. Not necessarily. I don't. We don't read like the original texts or anything. We modernize it all, but yeah,
that's okay. I mean, I just because I've been teaching yoga for a long time, so it's like they're kind of intertwined a lot. I find all of the spiritual teachings are intertwined, separate, similar, but slightly different flavors, and I love them all. I always tell people I'm multi-denominational. I believe all of them, actually. So, it's like, it's just interesting and I think about, Buddhism. When I was in India, I asked a monk, I said, the Buddha didn't intend this to be a religion. And she said, oh, it's not a religion. I said, well, because some of the things that the monks do, seem very almost like a religious practice. And she said, no, we're just really honoring his wisdom. I'm like, okay, that works for me. But it just was a way of living in that peaceful, joyful state, right? It's like we come to the world in a state of joy, and then stuff happens, and then hopefully we find our way back to it. And I know you have programs Are all of your programs group programs, or do you do one-on-one type things, or how does
I
it
do
work?
intensives periodically. We're in an intensive right now where I have one-on-one clients, and they did have group participation also, and we have guest teachers. So during when I'm running an intensive, I do one-on-ones with clients.
Right. And your intensives are, did you say 4 months?
3 months is the
3
one that
months.
we're doing right now. Yeah.
Wow. And what do you find people as they're moving through? What is the experience of a lot of people as they're moving through it?
I think that when it varies a lot, which is
Yeah.
why it's great to have the one-on-one individual attention. I can meet people wherever they are. I think the ones who come in knowing, I think that there is a way for me to to be, joyful. I don't know how to do it. That's not my experience right now. I'm very much at effect with my conditions, the things that are going on around me. The ones that come in with just a glimmer of a belief that it's possible, we can get the crowbar in there and make really good headway really quickly. Yeah.
Right.
It's the ones that come in without that belief that I have to spend some time convincing them,
Right.
like they just don't believe. They think it's all kind of like, if anybody's actually being that happy every day, it's because you've got this in place and this in place and this in place, and you don't have all these stresses I have. Like, well, no, because I had all those stresses and I got this in place, and then all that fell into place, So
Right. Yeah. We tend to look at people who are, um, I don't want to say ahead, but in a different place than us, or in a place we want to be, saying, oh, sure, they had this and this and this. But you're looking at, I had a coach once say, don't compare your middle to their end. So if you're at the beginning of a process, of course you're going to be in a different place because they've been doing other things. But uh, it's in our nature to use comparison. So as long as we can check in and go, wait a minute, maybe that's my target instead of this is why I don't have it. Right.
yeah.
And your book, Free Your Joy, does that take people through kind of some ideas on
Hmm.
how to move themselves, open the door, even a crack?
Very much so. I wrote Free Your Joy as the most DIY version I could possibly do of what we do in Joy School. And Joy School, and outside of the 3-month intensives, we have group programs that are ongoing all the time. So you can always come into Joy School at any point and join a group.
Oh, cool.
But the groups cycle through the keys, and there's a lot more that we can do in live online groups that I couldn't put into a book, of course, but it's for just I wanted to reach as many people as possible with this possibility. This Here are some practices to put into place. So it's structured for anybody who just wants to, who's a good self-starter. It gives you
Right.
52 weeks of practices to go put into your life, and it's meant to be read over the course of a year, where you learn to practice, go put it in your life, and come back and then put the next one in your life. Everybody tells me they read it through first, and that's fine. That's no problem in getting the overview, but then they all go back and do the practices. So yeah, that's how the book is set up. And a lot of people who read the book want to come to Joy School because you recognize that doing it in group, there's such beautiful, compassionate, warm, welcoming groups, that to have other people who understand what you're doing and how you're trying to apply it, because a lot of us have this sort of awakening to these ideas and understandings without having anybody in their real lives that they can talk to about it, because it's really not such mainstream thinking to be able to apply this sort of magic to your life and see it all transform. So to be in community with other people who are doing it and see how their lives are shifting is really beneficial to the journey.
I think the more we work on this, the more it will be mainstream, right? I mean, I know that's my goal, is to have this wellness idea and this idea of joy be mainstream. And it is true, when you first start on those journeys, especially if it's very different than anything you've ever done. I remember when I was in corporate finance and then I went into the wellness world, my corporate finance community just didn't compute, right? It's like, she's doing what? So needless to say,
Yeah.
my community has shifted a lot over the last 20 years, right? And it's so amazing right now, I find, where we are in the world, that you can find these communities now. And if they're not in your locale, they are online. And there's so many people searching for these same things because one of the key aspects to wellness that I always talk to people about is your who's your community, who's supporting you, who's helping you in this search for life, the world, and everything. you know,
I agree. I think that's why consciousness is expanding at such a rapid clip now, is because these communities people can find one another, and it just amplifies the journey so much. It amplifies self-compassion and self-understanding when you don't feel like an alien in the community that you live in, because we are still kind of far and few enough that back in the days when we were relegated to whoever happened to be in the proximity of our geography, you really could go through your whole life feeling just like an outcast or an alien on the planet, because nobody else is seeing the things the way that you're seeing them, or understanding the energetic principles the way you are. And now there's millions of us. We just have
right,
to, push a few buttons to find each other and connect to them.
right, and I find this fascinating since COVID started that it has become such a normal thing to meet a group online and find all those similarities. And this was way back when I did one of my first teacher trainings. And at that time, we were talking about the Buddha, the next Buddha, who's the next Buddha. And the next Buddha is the Sangha, which is the community. So the next Buddha is actually supposed to be not just a person, it's supposed to be the community. And I think that it's happening, man. It's happening in the world. And I think that's a good thing. And that scares some people. Do you find that people get scared when they start to feel happy?
Yeah. I mean, that's just to tie everything today back into Buddhism. That's the attachment piece. It's right. It's like there are two things that our human minds are so programmed for. It's like, don't have the things I don't want, and if I have the things I want, keep them and hold on to them. And but all things are impermanent, right? That's another Buddhist maxim. So it's like trusting that whatever happy circumstance we've created, attracted into our life, is going to fall away, and it'll be replaced by another happy circumstance, another equally, that this is the nature of a human life here, right? We're not going to have the exact things that we want and avoid all the things we don't want all the time. That's not a journey. That would get so boring in 2 seconds, right? We all
Yeah.
actually, there's something in our humanness that craves the mix of the challenges and the beauty. That's what all our art is about. That's why we binge a Netflix series, right? That's what novels are about, because there's something in us that likes that mix. But then when it's in our own lives, we're all, some problem shows up, some appointment, and we're all indignant and shocked and like, how could this problem have happened? What are the odds? Well, the odds are really good, right? Because we're here to have that human journey. We're here to have challenges, and it's what we bring to the challenges, how we, navigate it, that determines our level of joy.
Right. And it's like and you can see it in relationships. If you're in a happy relationship, you hold on to it. You can. People sometimes do hold on to it so tight, like it's going to get away from them. And then it ends up leaving because it was too tight. It was like choked the life out of it. I had a funny thought when you talked about impermanence. I was in India and I was in at the Dalai Lama's, and he was giving a talk, and he blew. I'm still thinking about this one. He said, "Everything is impermanent, including impermanence," and I went, "What?" So that was a long time ago. That was probably like 16 years ago, and I'm still going, "What?"
Yeah, I can have to sit with that one. I can't say that immediately made sense to me either.
Right? Maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe it's like, what's the sound of one hand clapping or something?
Right. Koan that we're supposed to meditate on. Yeah.
Right? Now, when people get your Free Your Joy book and they read to the end, um, What is the first thing? What's the first thing that you get people to do? The first
In the
practice.
book, the first practice,
Yeah.
the first couple of steps are all about that becoming the observer that I
Right.
mentioned
Okay.
earlier. So just a really like basic way to do it before you really have to separate out the consciousness of yourself, which is a later step, is just throughout the day, check in with your feeling state.
Mm,
Just make a mental note. Some of my early, on Joy Schoolers will set their phones or their watches to go off at different intervals, at least 3 times a day. Drop in, tune out everything around you, and say, darling, what are you feeling? And I always insist on terms of endearment with our sweet little selves, which is really hard for a lot of people coming in. Like that's not what the voice in the head calls them, right? So,
right.
darling, what are you feeling? And then just notice what the natural tendency is with that. Do we judge our feelings? Do we say, I shouldn't be feeling that way? I have no right to feel that way. Do we deny it? Do we try? And just notice our relationship to our most true feeling states. That
Right.
begins the observer process. And then once you find out what you're feeling, darling, what do you need? And sometimes it's as simple as right now, I need to open a window for some fresh air. I need a cup of tea. I need to close my eyes for 5 minutes and not do this project that's making me crazy and just get some, we deprive ourselves of these really simple opportunities to nurture and have compassion for ourselves until we make a point of doing it. So that's just like a really, really early on practice. And then after a while, we say, darling, what would you love? Just to open that. And sometimes you can identify something that you'd love that you can just like go do right away. And very often what you'd love feels impossible or out of reach, but still having opened that energetic portal to what we love is the first step to co-creating with the universe to show us maybe some steps that would take us in that direction toward what we would
Right. I was actually listening to a podcast recently, and she was talking about that co-creation. And I've heard it so many times, and maybe it was just the way I was listening. And she was saying people feel lost and they don't know what they want. And she said, it doesn't matter. you know, you're here for your experience. So just pick something and tell the universe what you want so they can start helping you do it, because they're just sitting. She said, she's sitting back there going, you just let me know when you're ready, and we'll make it happen. So
Yeah.
I thought, oh yeah, that's it. We waffle and waffle. Should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do this? And it was just like, just pick something for God's sakes.
I
And I
love
say, pick joy,
Yeah.
right?
So much of that, I believe, all the whole, manifestation. I usually don't use the word manifestation, but it's like the whole picking something that you want and then getting it, to me, is for no other reason than to show yourself. Yeah, to just show yourself that you're in the flow. You've kind of mastered the right creative essence that whatever you want is going to show up. Because when we know that, it doesn't matter what we're picking. Like you said, just pick anything, because it's just an
Right.
experiment anyway. We're just playing a game. And the way a lot of people think about manifestation, I think, just perpetuates that mistaken idea that getting things out there is going to make you happy.
Yeah.
I always use the terms, we're going to become conscious creators in a mostly unconscious world, which it satisfies them because they hear, oh, I'm going to create what I want. Okay. But then we can get in there and really see that, like, conscious creation is just about being in flow with what's in front of us so that we can bring the right energy to it to move it in a direction that does contribute more toward joy for self and others.
And I think that a lot of people, because they're thinking, I'm going to manifest, and you're talking about the outside, outside, outside. But if they haven't managed the inside part yet, it's not going to work, because they'll say, well, I want that, but maybe I shouldn't have that. Maybe I shouldn't have that. Maybe I should actually want this. And so I think it won't work until they get their inner joy worked out anyway, and the ease and the peace of, Well, it's just, being calm and that centered place, and not being attached to what it is that you want, right? It's like, I would like a pizza, but it's okay if I don't get one. It's like, and I
Yeah.
deserve pizza, and I would like a pizza, but it's okay. You know? Okay, universe, whatever you want, but I'd like a pizza.
And that's probably the exact energy that would have a pizza appear on your doorstep. Because when you have that lack of attachment, and in joy school we discern between our top level desires and what we call our soul desires, because our soul desires are often, once we get clear on that, because all of these things we want up here, there's always something underneath it. I want that because I feel like it'll make me look more important in the world, or I want that because then these people over here, I'll be more pleasing to them and they'll admire me, or I want that because I'm really scared that the world is a unpredictable, horrible, scary place, and that will make me feel safer. So always when we get to what's underlying the thing that we think we want, then we can get more clear on our big picture soul desires. And sometimes that makes it clear that the thing we thought we wanted really isn't what we want. We want something different.
Right. And that takes a little bit of time and digging. And it's not always comfortable, but I think it's so valuable. And I think it's so important to do that with someone who can help you, right? Um, Sometimes it ends up as the dark night of the soul, as I've heard it referred to recently. And you need someone to hold the light for you, right? So knowing that you can actually come back out of it
Yeah.
again, right? And
Yeah.
I think that it can seem scary, but I think knowing those things is so freeing, right? It frees you
And
from
so
that
often that dark night of
external.
the soul is a gift. Yeah.
Say that
And it
I
never
missed the
feels like a
last bit.
gift when you're in it.
No.
I was just saying, so often that dark night of the soul is a gift, and
Yeah.
we can only see it as a gift in hindsight, looking back, because that's where we get sort of stripped of all this nonsense, the ticker tape, all the things that we've been subscribing to seem unimportant when something really grabs us like that, and we're in grief or we're in despair. It's a really beautiful canvas to build from. And there's the whole contrast principle, right? The analogy about the farther back you pull the arrow, the faster and farther it's gonna fly. It's like we sometimes just need, and sometimes we subconsciously create a big downfall, a big crash in our life, because there's a part of us that's not in our logical brain. There's a part of us that knows that that's how you clear the slate, and that's how the phoenix can come out of those ashes.
Right.
And everything,
I
when it gets good, is going to feel so much better because you've known that other place. you know,
Right.
It's like,
Everything is contrast. Everything in life is contrast. So you won't know how good is if you haven't seen how bad is, right? That's one way to. I always remember Khalil Gibran, because that's one of the things in the one of his books. I had another thought and it left my head, so it wasn't important. And if people want to figure out how to get into Joy School or join one of your groups, where do they find you?
thank you. It's my name.com. So Lisa McCourt, McCourt.com. The book's
Beautiful.
there, the programs are there, Joy School's there.
And if people are driving or don't have anything to write on, don't worry, it's in the show notes. We will have this for you. And before we head off, um, I always give the guests the last word. So, do you have final words of wisdom for our friends?
This is going to sound so cliche because it's a term that I feel like we all kind of think we know, and it's self-love, and it's just people think I'm parent bashing when I say this. I'm really not, because parents just do the best they can with what they came in equipped with. But what I find again and again is that most of us just were not adequately loved. We weren't seen in the fullness of who we are. We felt like we were being shaped and molded, and that just a child interprets that as, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough as I am. And it kind of underlies almost everybody's obstacles to their joy, is this, I'm not good enough. And the more that we can have that tender compassion for our own sweet selves and get in community where we're fully attuned to and seen in our fullness and felt loved and felt acceptance, that's more healing than anything else we can do.
That's amazing. I don't find that cliche. I find that as wise. That's very wise, my friends. Thank you so much, Lisa, for coming and sharing your joy with us. It was such a pleasure to talk with you. And friends in podcast land, if you need some joy, you know where to find Lisa. And if you know friends who could use some more, send the podcast on to them, because come on, we're all here to help each other raise the vibration and become a more happy, joyful place, right? Right, Lisa?
Thank you so much, Heather. I've loved talking with you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, friends in podcast land. We'll talk